That's my brother from another mother, and you're messing with my cousin.
Candace Owens just obliterated Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds for dragging her into their absurd lawsuit. Blake accused Candace of exposing the truth, the very truth she was desperate to bury. But Candace, always 10 steps ahead, uncovered some game-changing details this Hollywood power couple didn't want anyone to see. And now, Blake is losing it. Let's break it down. On February 26th, Candace Owens was just minding her business, scrolling through the latest Hollywood drama, when, boom, her name popped up in Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' court filing. Out of nowhere. She had absolutely nothing to do with their lawsuit, yet somehow she got dragged into it, all because she dared to call out the nonsense. Most people would panic if A-list celebrities threw their name into a multi-million-dollar legal battle, but not Candace. Oh no, she took it as a badge of honor. She clowned Blake so hard, calling it a Christmas gift and joking that she can finally retire, because when a Hollywood actress and her equally self-righteous husband go out of their way to mention you in a lawsuit, that means you hit a nerve. And let's be real, Candace Owens isn't just some random internet personality. She's built her entire career ripping apart hypocrisy. That's exactly why Blake and Ryan can't stand her. She saw right through their carefully manufactured victim act and exposed it for what it really was. So, what did they do? They tried to paint her as the villain. But Candace, she's not backing down. But what Blake and Ryan don't seem to grasp is that Candace Owens doesn't back down. Ever. And now, she's got a front row seat to their spectacular downfall. Here's the real kicker. Blake Lively's PR stunt completely blew up in her face. Instead of making Balone look like the villain, the internet flipped on her. People saw right through the performance and realized this wasn't about justice, it was about control. And when things started spiraling out of her grip, she pulled the ultimate desperation move, a protective order to hide the evidence. On March 10th, Blake's legal team scrambled to request a protective order, demanding that certain documents and details stay confidential. Now, in high-profile cases, that's not unusual. Nobody wants their personal finances or irrelevant private details aired out. But Blake? She took it to a whole new level of shady. Instead of a standard protective order, she pushed for a modified version with an attorney's eyes only, AEO clause. Translation? Even Baloney himself wouldn't be allowed to see some of the evidence being used against him. Let that sink in. The defendant in a $400 million lawsuit, the person being sued, wouldn't even be allowed to see the evidence they're using to take him down. If that doesn't scream suspicious, what does? Blake's excuse? She claimed she wanted to protect third parties like Taylor Swift because exposing their private messages could cause unfair harm. First of all, Taylor Swift isn't even remotely involved in this case. This was nothing more than a cheap attempt to name-drop a celebrity to justify burying evidence. Second, let's talk about the hypocrisy. The same woman who leaked confidential text messages to the New York Times now suddenly cares about privacy? Make it make sense. Blone's legal team wasn't buying it for a second. They immediately called her out, pointing out that Blake's real motive wasn't to protect innocent people, it was to control the narrative. She wanted complete control over what the public sees, cherry-picking the information that gets released. The goal? Only let out the parts that make her look good while burying anything that exposes her lies. This wasn't about third-party privacy. This was about Blake Lively's reputation. And that's exactly why Candace Owens got dragged into this mess. She saw right through the act, called out the hypocrisy, and that sent Blake and Ryan into a tailspin. Instead of ignoring her, they dragged her into the lawsuit, trying to paint her as some kind of media puppet for Blown. They even quoted one of her late-night tweets in their court filing, a tweet where she summarized the entire situation in one brutal sentence. And that is what really set them off. Blake's team knew she was exposing the truth, and they couldn't handle it. They were so desperate that they even tried to lump Candace in with Paris Hilton, claiming she was part of some coordinated attack against them. It's pure damage control, and it's failing. But Candace Owens wasn't having it. She shut that nonsense down instantly, laughing at the idea that she's somehow connected to Balone and calling it exactly what it was, a pathetic smear attempt. Blake Lively thought she could manipulate the media, control public perception, and walk away as Hollywood's perfect victim. Instead, she ended up exposing herself as a fraud. Let's be real. She leaked private texts to try and destroy Blone's reputation, but then begged the court to protect her own messages when it suited her. She played the victim, claiming she was traumatized, while her husband was out cracking jokes about the lawsuit like it was some kind of punchline. And the moment people like Candace Owens started calling out the contradictions, Blake panicked, desperate to shut them down through legal intimidation. And what was Candace's so-called crime? Telling the truth. That's literally it. She didn't fabricate evidence. She didn't leak private messages to manipulate the media. And she sure as hell didn't file some ridiculous lawsuit demanding special treatment. No, all she did was speak facts. And that alone was enough to send Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds into full-blown meltdown mode. Candace did what she always does: call out hypocrisy, expose the lies, and dismantle anyone who tries to silence her. She took to her podcast and torched this lawsuit for what it really is: a desperate attempt by Blake and Ryan to rewrite reality to fit their carefully curated Hollywood narrative. That one tweet sent Blake's legal team into full-blown panic mode. They weren't freaking out over the lawsuit itself. They weren't scrambling over new evidence. No, their biggest concern was Candace Owens figuring them out. And instead of handling it rationally, like any competent legal team would, they actually quoted her tweet in their official court filings. Let's put this into perspective. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, two Hollywood millionaires with unlimited PR resources and top-tier lawyers, were so shaken by a single Candace Owens tweet that they felt the need to bring it up in court. And what was their big argument? That Candace was spreading misleading accusations. Seriously? The same Blake Lively who leaked private texts to the media is now accusing Candace of spreading misinformation? You cannot make this up. Blake's team even threw in some wild conspiracy nonsense, claiming that Candace and Perez Hilton were somehow part of a coordinated media attack against her. And Ryan? Oh, he was right there playing along. Because apparently in Blake's world, the only possible explanation for her victim narrative crumbling is that there's a massive conspiracy against her. It couldn't possibly be that people are just calling her out, right? And Candace's response? Exactly what you'd expect. She laughed in their faces. She flat out denied ever speaking to Balone or his lawyers and mocked the idea that she was some secret puppet in this lawsuit. She even took it a step further, joking that Baloney was her long-lost cousin just to show how utterly ridiculous their claims were. Blake and Ryan wanted control of the narrative. Instead, they lost it completely. And Candace didn't stop there. Instead of getting defensive, she embraced the chaos, celebrating the fact that she was now part of this Hollywood circus. She even joked, "I'm in the lawsuit now. My name is in legal documents. Mom, I made it." Blake and Ryan thought they could intimidate her. Instead, they just gave her even more material to roast them with. And speaking of Ryan Reynolds, this man needs to pick a lane, because right now, he's looking like Hollywood's biggest hypocrite. Let's break down Ryan's role in this mess. First, he played the supportive husband routine, standing by Blake as she accused Balone of ruining her life. But then, when it suited him, he mocked the entire lawsuit on SNL like it was some big joke. So which is it, Ryan? Is this a serious case that requires privacy and legal protection like your lawyers claim? Or is it just entertainment, something to laugh about on national television? Because you can't have both. Instead of just quietly supporting his wife, Ryan saw his moment, using SNL's 50th anniversary special to mock the very lawsuit Blake claimed was so traumatic. Yes, Ryan, your wife is supposedly suffering, and your response? Turn it into a joke. Make it make sense. And people online, they weren't having it. They immediately called him out for being a massive hypocrite, because you can't sit there and claim your wife is devastated while also making a mockery of it for laughs. But hey, that's classic Hollywood. Everything is a performance. Fans dragged him all over social media, calling him fake Lively, because at this point, he's just as much of an actor off-screen as he is on it. People online started calling him Crying Ryan. Because let's be real, this man loves playing the victim when it suits him, but the moment it benefits his PR, suddenly it's all one big joke. And let's not forget, Ryan and Blake's entire argument is that this lawsuit is so serious, so traumatizing, and so damaging that they need a special legal order to keep everything under wraps. But apparently, it's not that serious, because if it was, Ryan wouldn't be out here cracking jokes about it on TV. That's when people started putting the pieces together. Ryan doesn't actually care about justice. He cares about controlling the narrative. If he and Blake were really so confident that they were in the right, they wouldn't be obsessed with shutting down criticism and silencing voices like Candace Owens. But they do believe they have the right to play Hollywood victim, while the rest of us are just supposed to accept whatever version of the truth they decide to sell. And Candace, she wasn't about to let that happen. That's why she absolutely annihilated Hollywood's fake feminism in one of the most brutal roasting sessions ever. She torched Blake's entire PR stunt in a single sentence. "You cry victim in the media, but control what gets leaked. You can't have it both ways." Mic drop. And that's the real issue here. Blake and Ryan don't actually want transparency. They want control. They want to cherry pick which documents get released, which quotes get printed, and who's allowed to speak. That's why they tried to silence Balone. That's why they dragged Candace Owens into their mess. And that's why they panicked when people started asking real questions. Then Candace took it a step further, going straight for Hollywood's so-called feminists, the ones who only care about women's rights when it benefits them. She exposed how Blake is using feminism as a shield, pretending to be this fragile, helpless victim, when in reality, she's weaponizing the legal system to try and destroy someone's career. This is what fake feminism looks like. It's not about justice. It's about power. It's about control. It's about making sure that the rich and famous always get to tell their side of the story while everyone else is expected to stay silent. Candace ripped apart every contradiction, every manipulation, and every outright lie in this case. She called out how Blake's legal arguments directly contradict her public statements. She exposed how Blake's PR team has been caught leaking information while at the same time crying about privacy. And most importantly, she showed the world that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are not victims. This isn't about feminism. This isn't about protecting women. This is about two Hollywood elites who are terrified of the truth getting out. And instead of owning up to their actions, they're pulling every dirty trick in the book to silence anyone who dares call them out. Let's be clear. Candace Owens didn't attack Blake Lively. She exposed her. And the only reason Blake is spiraling right now is because she got caught. She thought she could control the media. She thought she could manipulate public perception. She thought she could drag Candace into this mess and scare her into silence. But here's the thing. Candace Owens doesn't back down, ever. And now that she's officially in this fight, she's not going anywhere. Social media absolutely torched Blake and Ryan, and they deserved every second of it. Within hours, Chakri's fake, lively, and crying Ryan were trending everywhere. And let's be honest, those names are spot on. Blake has been exposed as nothing more than a Hollywood manipulator, twisting the narrative to make herself look like the victim, all while hiding behind carefully crafted legal strategies. And Ryan, he's just there for damage control, playing the supportive husband while mocking the entire situation on national television. The act is falling apart and everyone's watching. Fans wasted no time calling Blake out, accusing her of using this lawsuit as nothing more than a career move. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. Before this legal disaster, she was just another actress trying to stay relevant. But suddenly, she positions herself as a victim, makes dramatic claims about being silenced, and boom, she's back in the headlines. Convenient, isn't it? Except there was one problem. The legal documents started exposing her contradictions. Balone's case? It kept getting stronger. Blake's argument? Falling apart. Suddenly, the same woman who wanted the world to believe her story was now desperately fighting to keep information from the public. Why? Because the truth was about to destroy her. Even the media started turning on her. At first, of course, the usual Hollywood mouthpieces ran with the Blake Lively, the brave survivor narrative. But the moment real journalists started digging into court filings, PR leaks, and blatant contradictions, even they couldn't ignore the mess. It didn't take long for headlines to shift from sympathy to skepticism. Journalists started asking real questions. If Blake wanted transparency, why was she begging for a protective order? If she was so traumatized, why was she desperately trying to hide information from the public? The cracks were showing, and now everyone was watching. Why was Ryan out here cracking jokes about the lawsuit if this was really about justice? And if Blake was so committed to the truth, why did she leak private texts to the media before the case even started? Then came the legal experts, and surprise, surprise, they weren't buying her story either. The more they analyzed the court filings, the more obvious it became. Blake's case wasn't just weak, it was completely falling apart. Lawyers openly pointed out that her contradictory statements were making it harder and harder to take her claims seriously. And once the narrative started crumbling, her legal team had one last desperate move: bury the evidence and pray nobody notices. Which brings us to March 10th, the day everyone's waiting for. That's when the judge decides whether Blake gets to keep everything hidden or if the truth finally comes out. And let's be real, if she was telling the truth, wouldn't she want everything out in the open? But no, she's terrified of that happening because her entire strategy is built on controlling what information gets released. And if the judge doesn't side with her, she's in deep trouble. And then, of course, there's the Taylor Swift factor. Because apparently Blake couldn't just ruin her own reputation, she had to drag Taylor's name into this mess too. Her legal team argued that third parties like Taylor Swift could be unfairly harmed if certain documents became public. Translation? She's using Taylor as a human shield to protect herself. Now let's stop and think for a second. Taylor Swift isn't even involved in this lawsuit, so why is Blake so desperate to keep her messages hidden? What's in those texts that she doesn't want the world to see? Because if Ballone's team subpoenas those messages, it could blow this case wide open, exposing just how deep the PR manipulation goes. Maybe we'd finally see just how much of this case was scripted from the start. Meanwhile, Candace Owens, she's just sitting back, watching the chaos unfold, loving every second of it. And one thing's for sure, she's not letting this go. If Blake thought that dragging her into this lawsuit would scare her into silence, she seriously underestimated who she was dealing with. Candace has already made it clear she's invested in exposing Hollywood's corruption. And this case, it's turning into the perfect example of how the elite weaponize the legal system to protect themselves. Blake and Ryan thought they could control the narrative, but all they did was make things worse for themselves. Instead of burying the truth, they brought even more attention to it. Instead of silencing Candace, they gave her more fuel to keep talking. And instead of gaining sympathy, they've become the laughingstock of social media. At this point, Candace Owens is officially part of the lawsuit narrative, and she's loving every second of it. Blake and Ryan are squirming, desperately trying to spin this disaster, but here's the truth, there's no way out. They started this mess, and now they're stuck in it. Hollywood elites love playing the victim while silencing their critics, but this time, it's not working. Blake thought she could drag Candace into this and shut her up, but all she did was hand her the perfect opportunity to expose everything. And Candace? She's already promised to keep going. At this point, Blake has no idea what's coming for her because now that the truth is out, there's no getting rid of Candace Owens. Blake and Ryan aren't mad because people are lying about them. They're mad because people are telling the truth. And Candace Owens isn't going anywhere. Now that she's officially part of this Hollywood circus, she's going to keep exposing every bit of hypocrisy she sees. Blake Lively wanted to play the game, but she just made the biggest mistake of her career. She picked a fight with someone who isn't afraid to call her out. Blake and Ryan thought they could control the narrative, but Candace Owens just exposed everything. And this is far from over. Subscribe for more truth bombs, share this with everyone, and smash that like button, because this Hollywood meltdown is just getting started. See you in the next one.